Hi everyone, in today's video, we will have a look at a particular scenario. So the problem statement goes like this. If login IP restrictions are enabled in Salesforce, we know that Salesforce blocks the initial authorization request if that request originates from an IP which is outside the allowed range. But what if the initial authorization request is made from an allowed IP, however, the subsequent API call using the access token issued as part of the authorization request, the subsequent API call is made from an IP address outside of the allowed range. Will Salesforce block the subsequent API call? Let's try to find out. To test this scenario, we will be using authorization code flow. What I have done is, I have already configured the initial setup for this. So first thing, I have created an external client type in Salesforce with this name, SFDF IP test. Let's have a look at the settings. All users can self-authorize. For now, I put this. Refresh token we won't be testing. So let it be, doesn't matter what is the setting for refresh token. For the initial test or for the initial run, I put relax IP restrictions. All right, let's go to settings. Callback URL, I put this because the external system we would be running on localhost. So that's why I put this callback URL. We will see why this callback URL has been put here. All right, OAuth scopes, I have only selected manage user data via APIs. And the flow I have selected as enable authorization code and credentials flow. So this is for authorization code flow. All right. Yeah, that's all from the Salesforce side. And to test this, I have created a test user. This is the user will be using this username. All right. And I have also assigned it a profile called system administrator clone. So this is nothing but a clone of system administrator profile. All right. So for this demo, I have cloned the system administrator profile and the name is system administrator clone and assign this profile to this user. And if I go to the profile, system administrator clone, yeah. So for the initial run, I have not put any IP restrictions. All right, there is no IP restrictions. So this is from the Salesforce side. Now, coming to the external system, which will make a API call to the Salesforce, what I have done is, I have created a JavaScript code and we will run this JavaScript code in using Node.js. And this will serve as our external system, which will make the API call to Salesforce. And again, I've already made the setup. We need not go into details of what this, how this code is written. Once I run this, you will understand what this code is doing. All we need to understand is the flow for this demo. All right, so I have also saved in my .env file the, go to this, right? The secrets from this external client app, I have saved in the .env file, and this code will refer that .env file. All right. Now let's run this JavaScript file using Node.js first. So for that, let's get the location where this file is stored. So let's copy that location, right? This location, open command prompt, navigate to that location. So we are inside Salesforce IP test. So inside this, we have this server.js. All right. So how do we run this server.js? Node server.js. So now this JavaScript code is running on localhost port 3000. This particular code. And what we need to do next is copy this and let's open it in a browser. So this is our Edge browser, and for this demo, I'll open an incognito window and open the localhost port 3000 here, right? So you can see something has appeared on the screen, Salesforce OAuth IP test, login to Salesforce, call Salesforce API. So all this is coming from where? It's coming from this code now. You see Salesforce API test, right? So all this coming from this code because this code is running on localhost port 3000 using Node.js. And when we entered that particular URL, localhost 3000, we are seeing this code now, the JavaScript code, okay? So it has two parts, login to Salesforce and then call Salesforce API. So when we click on login to Salesforce, what it will do is it will initiate the authorization code flow. That's how the JavaScript code is written here. Okay, it will initiate the authorization code flow, and then using the authorization code flow, we have to get the access token. So for that, let's initiate the flow. Let's click on login to Salesforce. Yeah. So as I said, right, we'll be using this user for this particular demo. So right now we have been redirected to Salesforce login page for this user, the password. Yeah. So this is authorization code flow, right? That's how this works. Now our external client tab is asking us to give the consent to our JavaScript code, right? So I'll click allow. So access token has been granted, right? So next is we will call the Salesforce API. Now what actually we are calling as part of the API? So access token has been granted, the first part. Okay, we have got the access token, and using that access token, we'll make an API call to do what? To a simple API call to get the details of 5 accounts from this org. Okay, so when I click on call Salesforce API, we should ideally get the details of 5 accounts from the Salesforce org, right? So we have got details of these 5 accounts, right? Edge Communications, Burlington Textiles and all. So you can see everything is working fine. Right now, we had not enforced any IP restriction and everything is working fine. Both the parts, the authorization part, the initial part, as well as the subsequent API call is also working fine. All right. And for this flow, I said that I use this user, right? This one. So just to make sure there's no confusion, this is actually the same user which I had shown earlier in the video. If I go back, right, this user, which has this system administrator clone profile, right? So this is the same user. All right. Now let's again execute this flow with IP restrictions enforced. All right. So for that, let's go to the client tab first, edit, enforce IP restrictions. All right. Let's go to the user, open the profile, and let's set a login IP ranges. I think it's not loading from here. Let's close this. Let's find it out from here. Profile, system administrator clone. That's the profile we are looking for. System administrator clone, login IP ranges. Okay, now let's find out what is my public IP. So for that, I will open one more command prompt instance and use this curl command to get my public IP. Yeah, so this is my public IP. Let's copy this, go back to the profile and set the range. All right. Okay, so now IP ranges are enforced. Now what we need to do is we need to re-execute this flow, but from a different IP, from a different public IP address, right? Not from this IP address. So for that, what we'll do, I will change my Wi-Fi connection to a different network. All right. So right now I'm connected to this network. What I'll do, I'll disconnect from this and I'll connect to my phone's network. All right. Yeah. So now I'm connected to my phone's hotspot, and let's see now what's the IP address. It should change now, right? If I execute the same command, right? It is now 223 something, and earlier it was 103. So now let's re-execute this flow. So for that, let's copy this. Again, open incognito window, paste, and now let's click login to Salesforce. And let's get the user. Yeah. Enter the password. You see, it's not letting me enter. How do we check what error we got? So let's go to this user and check the login history. So right now the last login history was 6/12, right? Let's refresh this. See, now latest is 8/29, 19th August, and it is saying restricted IP. So it is not allowing because we enforced IP restrictions, right? So what has happened is when we enforced IP restrictions, it did not even allow me to execute the initial authorization code flow. What I mean is, copy this. So first part is the initial authorization and second part is calling the actual API using the access token which we get from the initial authorization, right? So when the IP restrictions were enforced, Salesforce even did not allow the initial authorization to happen. It blocked. Okay. Now what I'll do, I'll disconnect from my mobile phone's hotspot and connect back to the original network. All right. And let's again check what's my IP. So this is again the original IP, right? So this is the IP which I have added in the IP ranges, login IP ranges in the system administrator profile. All right. Now ideally, I'm back to my original IP, and now if I try to execute this flow again, because I'm initiating the request from the allowed IP, this authorization request should go through. All right. So let's have a look at it. Okay. Let me enter the username, login, password. See, it has allowed me. It is asking for verification code. Let me get the verification code which I have received on my email. Click on verify. Yeah. So the connected app is asking the consent to allow access. Click on allow. And it went through successfully. Why? Because we are back to we are initiating the request from the allowed IP ranges. Now what I will do is, I will again switch back to my mobile hotspot. Okay. And let's see if the subsequent call is allowed or not. Let me connect back to the mobile hotspot. Right. Let's verify the IP once again. Again, I'm on a different IP. Right. Now let's make the API call. Let's click on this and let's see what happens. Will I be allowed, or Salesforce will restrict because I'm initiating the request from an IP which is not in the allowed IP ranges for the particular profile, right? The system administrator clone profile. Let's click on this. It did not block me. It gave the result. It gave the result of the 5 accounts which we have queried in the access request. All right. Let's try to understand the behavior here. So I have summarized it here in this doc. When the login IP restrictions are enabled in Salesforce, then Salesforce performs the IP check only during the initial authorization by default. All right. And once the access token is issued, the subsequent API calls are not subject to the same login IP range check. What does that mean? So let's go back here. Let's copy this localhost path, open it again. So we tested 3 flows. In the first flow, we did not apply any IP restrictions at the profile level in Salesforce. So in that case, both the steps, that is the first step, which is the initial authorization request, also went through, and the second step, which is subsequent API call using the access token which we got from the first step. So the second step also went through successfully. In the second flow, we applied the IP restriction at the profile level. So in that case, Salesforce did not even allow the first step, that is the initial authorization request, this step, to go through. So Salesforce blocked it. So the first step was blocked. So anyways, then there is no point of second step because the first itself was blocked. What we did in the third flow was, what we tested in the third flow was, the initial authorization request we made from the allowed IP range. So Salesforce allowed it. Fine, and we got the access token. But the subsequent API call using the access token we made from the IP address which was not in the allowed range, IP range. So Salesforce did not block it. Salesforce did not block the second API call or the subsequent API call, even though it was made from an IP address which was not within the allowed IP range. All right. And that's what we have written here, right? Once the access token is issued, the subsequent API calls are not subject to same login range check. So once if the access token is granted and using that access token, any system is making an API call, then even if IP restrictions are in place in Salesforce, still Salesforce will not apply those IP restriction check. So that is the by default behavior of Salesforce. All right. And what could be the reason for this behavior, that Salesforce applies the IP restriction check only on the initial authorization call and not on the subsequent API calls? One of the reasons could be that once the user or the external system has been successfully authorized and they have got the access token, then there are chances that they can change their networks, right? So they could move from office network to home network. They can switch from Wi-Fi to mobile hotspot, or they can use VPNs or proxies. So every time they make this move, their IP address would change. And then if Salesforce enforces IP restriction check on each subsequent API calls, then all this, whenever they make this move of changing their networks, their request would be blocked by Salesforce. So that is less flexible, as well as at times annoying for the external systems or users. So that is the reason by default Salesforce does not enforce IP restriction check once the access token has been granted or once the external system or the user has been authorized. After that, Salesforce will not apply the IP restriction check on the subsequent API calls or subsequent access request. All right. However, as I said, this is the default behavior, but Salesforce does provide an option to override this behavior. And where is that option? So let's go to the org again. Let's go to session settings. Yeah. So in this, there's an option called, let me find that option, enforce. Yeah, enforce login IP ranges on every request. So if you check this option, then this default behavior will be overridden. What does that mean? That now IP restriction check would be applied on every call. It would be applied on authorization request, plus it would also be applied on subsequent API calls, right? So let's check this option and let's see how it works. Okay, I have checked this. Let's save. Right, and now let's reinitiate the flow. And for this, what we'll do, we should have the IP restrictions in place, right? And what I realized is, while making this video, I took a break, and when I resumed, my public IP has changed because my ISP provides dynamic IP, right? It could change over time. So what I'll do now is I'll get the new IP address, my new public IP, right? So I'm running the command again. Yeah, so this is my new IP, and I will save this IP in my profile. Okay, so this is system administrator role, and this is the IP ranges. I have deleted the old one. So this is my new public IP. Okay, saving this here. So IP restrictions are in place. All right, and now let's reinitiate the journey. For that, let's go to incognito mode. I have closed the incognito mode as well. So I'll open incognito and I'll paste my localhost URL here. So yeah, so right now we'll reinitiate the journey, and right now IP restrictions are in place, but I am initiating the first authorization request from the IP address which is within the allowed IP range at the profile level. So this ideally should go through. Let's click on this. Let's get the user. Yeah, get the user ID. So this is our user. Copy this. Let's go back. Yeah, it went through. I've got a request for the verification code. Let me enter the verification code 678754. Yep, the external client type is asking for consent. Click on allow. Yeah, access token is granted. All right, so the first call, the initial authorization request went through because we made that request from the allowed IP. All right, now what I will do is I will change my network again to my mobile hotspot, and then we will test what happens when we make the subsequent API call. All right, so let me disconnect from my Wi-Fi, and yeah, let me connect to my mobile hotspot, and this should change my IP address. Yeah, this is connected. Now let's check what is my IP address now. So earlier it was this, and this is what is right now configured at the profile level in login IP ranges, right? So let's check what is my current IP. Yeah, now this has changed. Now this we already did, before enabling that setting, enforce IP restriction on every call, right? This we already did, and at that time, if you remember, what happened was Salesforce did not block this subsequent API call. It allowed it, but right now we have that particular session settings enabled, and let's see how it behaves. All right. So let's click on this call Salesforce API. So right now I'm making a call from the IP address which is not within the allowed range. Okay, let's see. See, we got this error, right? Access from current IP address is not allowed. Insufficient access. Earlier, Salesforce did not block it, but when we have enabled the session settings, right? This setting. This setting, right? This one, enforce login IP ranges on every request. This time, Salesforce blocked it. Blocked the subsequent API call. All right. So if the setting is enabled, then Salesforce will apply the login IP restrictions on any call, be it initial authorization request or subsequent API call. If this setting is not enabled, then Salesforce will apply the IP restriction check only on the initial authorization request. All right. So this was a use case I wanted to demonstrate in this video. Hope you have learned something new and you found this useful. And yeah, that's all for this video. Take care. Bye.